for users of the system to see the content. One of them that you don't see here is we're going to have what we call an inventor or an innovator, kind of its own track on its own. And those are people that actually start changing what is in the content of this transformation participation engine on themselves. You don't just start with that necessarily, those skills. You got to go do some rudimentary stuff. It'll unlock a mission. It'll give you a couple of things that you need to do. Thanks to that mission, you're now a kind of a more involved person, and you can start changing that actual system. The other big thing is that we want to make sure that the system's self-reinforcing. So you see these badges and these missions. A real problem with gamification these days is it awards, behavior that doesn't matter with external rewards. So, if you do this, I'm going to go give you an iPad or a vacation to Miami or something ridiculous like that. Good games are self-enforcing, and all they do is motivate you to play the game more. And so what we want to do is make sure that, yes, we're going to have some missions that you can unlock if you accomplish a certain amount of skills, but we want to make sure that those missions are really permission to go do something that you think is good for the organization. And so an idea might be that you've done a whole lot of technical practices, you've shown that you've gained a whole lot of skills. Well, I want to go run the let's get continuous integration across the enterprise. And by the way, it comes with some budget and some time and a blessing from the CIO. And we've actually got his permission to start reserving some of his R&D budget for people who unlock these missions. Our first minimum viable change is actually going to be a real simple kind of leaderboard that we're going to go stick up somewhere. We're going to explain the system just like I explained it to you guys. We're going to ask if anybody wants to get more involved with us and have some open workshops and some facilitation. And we'll see if anybody throws anything at us, is basically the reaction. We'll see if there's any other negative behavior that's happening. And then we'll try to do the same thing without the leaderboard, and we'll try to measure it. Realizing it's a real small sampling of folks. But we're going to make sure that we do this in really small steps, and we're really going to try to look for both the intended and the unintended consequences. Because we realize this is a really powerful tool, but it can also be really, really dangerous as well. So again, treading carefully on this one. So I think there's probably one thing that I want to leave with this audience is 8 months ago, 6 months ago, I can't remember the exact month I read the book, I knew nothing about the lean startup approach. My team knew nothing about the lean startup approach. And then we took it, we tried to adapt it for change management. We're really just starting. So what we're hoping is that people can just take this overall approach of validated learning when you're trying to change your organization and try to get into a validated learning mode, and maybe take even portions of this framework, modify it, extend it, adapt it, do whatever you need to it, because really new, and basically it's not even a community yet, it's just an idea in a couple people's heads with one implementation. We'd really like other people to start looking at change management from a validated learning perspective, so that they can get into the mindset that the tools and the techniques that they thought were going to be easy or difficult to adopt really aren't, and they can start changing their perspectives. With that, I'll open it up to questions that anybody has.
You said earlier something about ensuring that the makers of the system are not giving out the points. Can you tell us the methodology for giving out the points? How does that work?
Yeah, so I tried to explain that before, and I might have failed because it's a bit of a complicated idea. What we want to do is we'll seed the system, meaning that we're the guys with the skills, and so we've got these. We only get the points according to our own, inflated self-assessment of how great we are. And then what we're going to do is find the real eager champions within our client organization, and we're going to say, guess what? I just transferred you some skills, and here's the points that come along with it. It is now up to you to transfer those points to somebody else.
So once they transfer them, they don't have them anymore.
Well, there's two totals, right? One is all points I've ever acquired throughout the transformation, and the other is my current total that I can give away. So there'll be two totals.
Where do they get new ones?
They get new ones by going and acquiring skills from other people, because they don't have all the skills. And I could go give some skills to you, and you can go, hey, but I know test-driven development, you don't know test-driven development, and we'll get this exchange. Eventually, if people do this, we want to have a tutor, like a trainer badge, and a trainer badge can teach more than one people at once, and they can actually give it out in parallel. Yes?
You can do a collectible card game style deal too, where people trade cards as they learn skills.
That would actually work. Like I said, we're really open to some new ideas here. I love the idea of cards, right? Because then it's less of an electronic system, and it's more like a collector's item, and I think a lot of people would appreciate that. You know?
Yeah, I'm wondering how many of those issues when you finished the MVC and decided to pursue, what's the difference in involvement that you guys had to have when you
It's like a tax on our team because we have to support. So we have we didn't show that in that version of the Kanban system, but we have a swim lane for things that we're no longer actively doing, and it was kind of like in support mode. Sorry, maybe I'll ask, any MVC that gets changed requires some support afterwards. Because you can't just go put Kanban on in a department and say, well, you know what, I got to do a customer pivot, I'm going to go do Kanban over here, and then abandon these guys. So we're always doing some support activities, regardless of whether we're doing the MVC or we pursued or
What's the
pivoted.
ratio of involvement between the MVC period, which sounded like a lot of work,
Yeah.
right, and later on?
You'd have to ask my team. A couple of them are standing back there.
Okay, I'll ask them.
For me, it's not too bad, but I'm sure they'll not
We'll
say
give you
the
the
same
truth.
thing. Yes.
So can everybody see everybody else's badges and points?
Not, well, again, this is a plan that we're going to do. Right now, we're just in the, let's put the data in link it. And we have some spreadsheets, we export it out, and we have some dashboards that we use, Flow being one of them. But we're not showing anybody's individual status right now because we're the guys giving the points. And that would cause a very dysfunctional system where we're like, hey guys, here's your points. And suddenly everyone would be knocking down our door with either hammers or roses or something, and it wouldn't work out well.
So but will you eventually, once they?
Yeah, once they have the power to start giving the points to each other, and they have a track that says I can go and change the system on my own without us, then it's meant to be like, hey, look at my character sheet. I'm level 12 and you're level 8. It's okay, as long as people know that they can play in a fair system, I think that's okay. Any other questions?
Yeah.
Sure, I'll start with Al.
Okay. Jeff, for major IT transformations, can you make any comments or observations on the need to get the business side, the lines of business on board, understanding and supporting what we're doing within the IT organization? Because they're watching all of this and they probably consider us as somewhat of a black hole to begin with. They see all of these new processes being introduced, old systems kind of.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. All the transformations that we've been running in the public sector, even though they're lean transformations, didn't want to engage the business in the transformation at first, usually as a rule. And then once they felt that they got to a certain level of stability, they'd say, now it's time to, to kind of share. I think that's the wrong approach. I think you have to start right from the beginning, find some business customers who are willing to change with you, who are willing to learn with you, and share some bumps and bruises. On our latest transformation, that's what's happening. Because we've got all these physical boards, and it's a relatively co-located place, it's all in one building, VPs are taking VPs for tours and showing them the boards, and they're getting it, and they're saying, well, where's my Kanban system? So I think you really want to bring these guys in first. Sure.
How do you, you want to change people's behavior, and changing behavior sometimes takes a long time, right?
Yes.
So how do you know if the test you're doing or the change you're doing is actually unsuccessful, so you need to pivot, or it just takes time for people to change their behavior?
You're right, it could have just been we did it, and then 3 months later the behavior starts to change. No framework's perfect. I think the big key here is that all we're trying to do is change agents are usually guided by either this concrete plan and some intuition, or just a concrete plan and really bad intuition. And so what we're trying to do here is say, by trying to at least categorize what we're trying to do into some kind of measurable framework, our intuition is really going in parallel with the numbers. We've had these MVCs that we said, well, we're going to introduce this MVC, we're going to watch it for a month because that's how long it takes. And then 1 week in, our intuition said, this sucks, this is not working, and we're kicking it out. Or a week and a half in, he said, this rocks, we've already made our objectives. Then we'd go take our little pad with our little measurements and go, okay, yes, 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 yes. And we're just letting our intuition guide the numbers. And really, you can't let this get in the way of your intuition. There's absolutely no way. Yeah, sure. Troy.
Yeah, so not so much a question about adoption, but more about what they're adopting.
Yeah. They're adopting the wrong thing?
Well, just seeing maybe cargo pull Kanban, right? Cargo pull Agile.
Well, or sort of adopting it incorrectly, or are you saying adopting the wrong stuff?
Just maybe they don't have a very deep understanding of what they're doing when they are going out to the board and making statements.
Yeah, and so we're not expecting people to have a real understanding what they're doing at the basic level. And that's why we have some people at that basic level, but we've got some prowess level guys at the bottom. And you know what, we did a couple things there. We hired, right? Some guys who knew it. We were lucky enough to get Jason Little to say he's going to take a full-time job here, and that's how we got our webmaster for free. But we had to work to get Jason in there and let him know it's not the end to work in a public sector organization. And we got a couple of other really good kind of more junior folk who have just been starting with Agile but had a lot of spark to them. We spent a lot of time coaching them. And so we've got our small team now that's going to be there after we go. And then everybody else, we found some stars in terms of that they were keen, they were eager. Some of them were doing continuous integration on our own. So we found those kind of, diamonds in the rough, so to speak. And, we spent some time with them. A lot of our agile pilots that were unsuccessful from a number of people over time perspective were successful. We found, 5 or 6 people that got it. And so we don't want everybody to get it to the deepest level. We need some people to do it so that this thing can continue to grow after we're done. Any other? Yes, sure.
Yeah, you mentioned that having that group of monkeys trying to keep the physical board and the electronic board synchronized is not something you want to do in the long term, but I mean, that had to break down at some points. And
it will. And so, again, we're taking that lean startup approach. It's okay to release a product that you could not possibly sustain at first. Because you're saying, hey, this is actually changing customer behavior. It's a good thing to do, but it's not sustainable. Eventually, we'll have this change in customer behavior, and we might have to almost do like an opposite MVC. We predict that if we stop doing this for them, they will continue to exhibit these behaviors. We're eventually going to downscale the service because we just won't have the capacity to do it anymore. And we'll downscale it in such a way that we'll have some validated learning around our ability to successfully downscale what we're doing. That or we'll automate somehow, or we'll figure out an alternate approach.
But did it break down at all in terms of, you missed some updates, some synchronizations?
Again, I think the team can answer that it's probably one of their biggest nightmares is keeping this thing up to date.
Yeah.
It's a good thing we have a relatively large team. We have 5 change agents, including myself. And then they're hiring full-time as well. So the CIO really understood that to do this properly, if you're going to have a hard deadline, you can't have the typical one coach across 100 people kind of model that we often see, especially if it's a fixed date. If you want to fixed date this, we need to be able to support this any way we can. Is there any other questions? Jason.
Just curious, what's the overall objective of this? Deadline? What needs to be done by that deadline? Just number of people adopting?
Number of people who have, I didn't try to say your throughput must be X or your capacity must be Y. We certainly want to show those kinds of performance improvements and maturity improvements, but I think that's the wrong thing to start out with when you're beginning with transformation. We're really trying to show that people are using different techniques. So it's exactly that. That's how, now there's some other milestones that we have to hit, tools, deliverables, kind of some other nonsense, kind of like that, but it's really about changing their working culture and their behavior. Basically, it's really what we're focused on here, and that's what we're trying to do.
So I suppose my question related to that then is, are you doing anything to make, so our hypothesis is that by doing this they'll achieve something eventually.
Yes, well, I mean, we set very hard dates around how many people at what level of maturity we want them to
It's
be.
like I kind of see we got them to buy the product, and we're convinced that the product will eventually produce results for them.
Are you talking about in terms of like actual performance and maturity
Exactly.
and all that kind of good stuff? Pretty much, yeah. I mean, because that's not where we started. We started with the opposite approach, which is we are going to measure the effectiveness of these techniques on this organization, and that's what our validated learning will be. But I think that's impossible in an organizational transformation. That's what Kanban's for, right? You put a Kanban system in place, you incrementally change some processes and some approaches over time, and you go look at the impact on your throughput and your lead time and your quality. Well, Kanban can take a long time to really get going in a stable state in some of these places. Some of you might say, no, it's just a couple of weeks. Not in the organizations that I've been. You really got to let Kanban kind of, work for quite a period of time before you even get into it's worth even measuring things. I find just using Kanban and visualizing the problem is really where a lot of organizations are for the first kind of 3-4 months. But that's just me, right? So.
Better finish it. We're out of time.
Oh, sorry, we're over time.
All right.
Can I do one more question?
I don't think so.
Sorry, guys.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks a lot.